What can I promise you that won't...
Hi everyone, my name is Jonathan Edmondson. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the founding artistic director of the Strides Collective, which is a new Philadelphia theater company that produces and develops work by emerging queer playwrights. On behalf of the entire collective, I wanted to thank you for joining us and supporting us as we kick off our 2022 season, which also includes our Emerging Playwrights program and our first live in-person production as a collective, the world premiere of The Pigeon at the Christchurch Neighborhood House from October 6th through October 16th. If you want to find out more about us, you can check us out on Instagram at The Strides Collective or our website, stridescollective.com, and stay tuned after the panel for a sneak peek of The Pigeon. We are so excited to be bringing modern queer stories to the Philadelphia theater community, and we can't do it without your support, so thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to connecting with you and sharing more stories. Thanks.
Change, change, change. No veil, no something blue, no rings to exchange.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to A Rainbow Connection. My name is Cameron, and we appreciate you joining us today from home, maybe from your office, or wherever you might be in this moment.
And my name is Amira, and we are so excited to be talking with our guests tonight.
As you heard from Jonathan, we are members of the Strides Collective. And as a collective, we produce and develop theatrical work by emerging playwrights that embraces the queer experience through authentic, modern, and innovative storytelling.
So tonight, we're just going to have a chat with some friends and talk all things theater and all things queer.
So we'd love to introduce to you our very two special guests we have joining with us today. First is performer, music director, and composer, Pax Ressler, everybody. Hey, hey.
Hello, hi, thanks for having me.
Hey.
Pax.
Our second guest is an actor, a fight choreographer, and intimacy director, Eli Lynn.
Hi, friends.
So thank you both for being here today. We're so excited to get to talk to you and learn more about your experience in the arts. And now, as Miss Wendy Williams says, let's get into the game. First, let's start with Eli. Eli, do you want to tell us what kind of work you do in the art? I mean, we gave you a very mini blurb, but elaborate on that more for us. Tell us, what you kind of do in the arts, in the theater, and you're based in Philly, but are you from Philly originally? How did you end up in Philly?
Oh, so hang on, let me restart my camera so I'm not a blur. Great, let's see how long that was on.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Eli Lynn. I live in Philadelphia. I've lived in Philadelphia for just over 5 years, and I know this because I just applied for a legal name change, and you have to have lived in a spot for 5 years so that they can prove that you're not an old-timey horse thief changing your name for nefarious reasons before they grant it to you. So that's how I know how long. But I'm not from Philadelphia originally. I'm from Texas and then Alabama. So I'm quite Southern.
Yeah.
I don't hear an accent at all, so I think that's
I have a BFA in musical theater, so I worked real hard to erase that so that I could be a good neutral actor.
Yes.
But if I'm on the phone with my mom, it comes out.
Yeah.
And what were the other questions? You had a whole list, and I was distracted by my fuzzy face.
list. So, what kind of work do you do in the arts?
Great. So you sort of listed the top three are actor, performer, and fight director and intimacy director. But I'm also a musician, and I used to be a dancer, but I don't do as much musical theater anymore. So the last thing I danced in was, I don't know, 4 years ago, something like that. But I also, I moonlight as a overhead carpenter and electrician. And I just directed a thing. Oh my God, I just directed a thing for the first time that just closed. That was fun and exciting.
So,
and I
of all trades.
anything people will give me money to do, I'll do for you. I've TD'd twice. I was not very good at it, but people paid me, so. But mostly actor, fight director.
I love that. Yes, multi-hyphenate for pay. Yes.
And Pax, what about you? Tell us a bit about where you're from, if it's not Philly, how you got to Philly, and kind of what you're doing in the arts.
Sure, of course. So my name is Pax. My pronouns are they, them. And I grew up in Lancaster County, which is an hour and a half west of Philly. Philly was the biggest big city, so I would come here a lot. But grew up there in Amish country, and I grew up Mennonite. So lots of stories there. But the work I do now in Philly is as a composer, as a performer, as a music director, working at the intersections of theater and music and arts and advocacy is kind of where I spend my time and where I feel most passionate about the work. And more, I'm learning like, oh, I want to do original things. I want to do devised work. I want to do things that are specific to Philly and that aren't being done anywhere else. So I think I'm like leaning into the creative juices that flow when I'm with a group of collaborators and we're building something from the ground up in Philly, as opposed to a play that was written and is being produced in Philly, for example. But yeah, all kinds of work. And like Eli, multi-hyphenate, I think is the way to be, like in Philly. Like it's a city that can support people who do lots of different things. And that feels great. I'm surprised to learn you're not a horse thief, Eli.
There's still time. There's still time.
Yeah.
I'm not a horse thief yet.
Add it to your resume, you know?
Yeah.
Special skills.
No, I love that. I love that Philly.
Awesome.
It seems, well, one, I feel like in school they tell you have to be able to do it all, right? It's like you got to be able to do this and that and this and that, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But I love that it's actually that's a real. I feel like for me it seemed like a huge undertaking, but it seems like for both you and Philly, you're able to kind of dabble in whatever is interesting to you or interests you at the moment, which is great because you can hone like a lot of different crafts. That's great. That's great to hear.
Yeah, and Pax, you were mentioning how the city can support these, wanting to do multiple things at once. So why don't we just start with you? Why don't you tell us a little bit, what's been your experience, would you say, in specifically Philly with being involved in theater and doing this queer-based work and advocacy and such?
Yeah, I experienced the Philly theater community as so generous and connective. Like there were so many people who introduced me to people who shared my interests or to other queer and trans people in the city. And I think like that is the work I want to do too. So like it's been really important to me to reciprocate the kind of generosity that I experienced in entering this community about like 7 years ago, to kind of pay that forward and to connect other people and their work to people with the similar interests and similar identity markers. So I started Gender Funk Philly with a friend, Desi Tibbs, and that's been a way to get people talking about trans artists in the city, trans and non-binary artists, and to like have a Rolodex of all of us in one place where they can find our work and hire us for projects. I think like a false narrative in the city has been that we aren't here or that there aren't trans people to tell trans stories. And this project has really been about making sure that they can't ignore our presence so that they hire us for the projects that involve our voices and projects that don't. We just want to like be collaborators in rooms everywhere in the city.
Right.
Absolutely.
And Eli, for you, kind of the same question.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I was really delighted to find such a welcoming and active queer community within the theater community in Philadelphia, especially because I was not yet out as trans when I moved to Philadelphia, but like the support of the queer and trans community has been just really delightful. And I hope, like Pax, that I continue to pay that forward. I work a lot with college students, and I try really hard to be really visible in all of those spaces so that they don't have to wait as long as I did to be like, you can be queer and trans and that it makes your art better. It is not a hindrance to the sort of person that you want to be. And like, let's take everything over. Basically, I'm amassing an army. As I was amassed into the army, I too am recruiting for all the queer artists everywhere. And I think that Gender Funk Philly is really important and excellent because it is one of those things that people are like, oh, well, we're telling a queer story, but no queer actor, or we like know this one queer actor. And you're like, shunk, I have a list for you. Right. I have so many people that they can't ignore us. And Philly, for the most part, especially the small theaters, Philly is a great place to make your own work, which I think really helps queer and trans voices be heard more than they might in a place like New York, where it's a little bit bigger and more corporate and you don't have those opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a really interesting thing to hear, that you came to Philly and you were not out yet as trans, and being I mean, I guess I don't want to speak for you, but do you feel like having that Philly queer theater scene allowed you to really come into that, or like find that for yourself,
I
or?
don't know about the theater scene per
Okay.
se at the time, but I would say that the community of queer people within the theater scene
Mm.
um, are like a huge blessing and
Mhm.
continue to be a huge blessing in my life. Like they are very much my found and chosen family.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you
Yeah.
feel the theater has changed since you both have been here, and it might be a little different for both of you, but um how has that changed in Philly in terms of like the stories that are being told, and where you see yourself in the theater, and in these shows and in these spaces? Like how it sounds like it's a really like supportive space, but I'm wondering,
Mm.
has it always been that? Has it grown? What that might look like for both of you.
Yeah.
Hmm. Kind of piggybacking off of, I'll start over. Kind of piggy what?
Piggy
Piggybacking.
what? Piggy who?
Piggybacking?
Backing?
uh, Piggybacking off of what Eli said, I'm thinking about how like queer and trans people just living as their authentic selves like creates this kind of wildfire that spreads where like other people can come out and be their authentic selves. And in that sense, I think queer and trans theater has really grown in the city in my time here, simply because like there is a cohort of people like really making space and creating that wildfire space that like clears the way for more people to be out. And I've like benefited from that, and I want to create that too. So I agree with Eli that it's in especially small theaters, devised companies, people doing original work, that queer and trans artists can thrive without the institutional and producerial like input and labor from folks who aren't really willing to hear or to produce our stories at this time. And we're trying to change that too, you know, like working on all levels. But I think it has really like made it clear to me that we can do so much in the places um, where we aren't currently, and we can try to be in those rooms, or we can try to build our own things. And I think like both of those angles are really valuable.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you both, sorry, Cameron, for the work that you are doing and continuing to do, and making it easier for the people that come after you, and building a community, or
Mm.
there was already a community, but like an army. Thank you for building that army, I should say. So would you say, Pax, or both of you really, when you guys first arrived to the city, was it that the city was so this welcoming space, so inclusive that you felt you could do this work, or was it you knew the work needed to be done and then the city caught up to you?
I would say that's a little bit difficult for me to gauge because of where I was as an actor personally when I moved to the
Mm.
city. And also, like, I didn't really know the city. When you first move to a city as an actor, you're going to all like the cattle calls. You don't really know the vibes of any of the theaters. You don't really know the vibes of any of the people.
Mm.
So it's sort of harder for me to say with confidence, like, well, it used to be this and now it's this, because I didn't know what it used to be, because I was a wee
Mhm.
baby actor. And especially when I first moved, like, I wasn't out yet, and I didn't have as clear of a concept of myself as an artist. But it has been interesting to see sort of post pandemic. I have had a lot more people interested in me for roles and places where previously I would not have been called in. And I
Mm.
hope that that continues. And I wonder what that's
Yeah.
about. But I'm delighted by it. I hope it continues to happen. Yeah, and I think what Pax was saying, both working on your own stuff is very important, but also working with, it's like being that one gay person in your family and everybody's like, oh my God, what a thing. And then you're at the family reunion and you're just a normal person, and that can
Yeah.
also make inroads. And I think as an artist, it's similar. Like, you can make this crazy, outlandish, queer devised stuff on your own in somebody's basement, which is wonderful. And people come see it. They're like, oh, how valuable. This art is wonderful. And I think that's something I really like Philly, is that it's like full of stuff like that. But then you can also like go to these these established theaters and do really great work just as like a human being.
Mhm.
And people are like, oh, queer people are also human beings. Shocking.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think so. I think
Concept.
those are valuable.
Yeah.
Right. No, I think there's this this sort of don't know if reckoning is the right word, or just like overcorrecting that's happening across the board, you know, like in theater or corporate America or like wherever. There is this kind of overcorrection. You know, we were all in our homes and like forced to like reckon with, or at least just pay attention to, you know, all what's the word I'm looking for? Just like all the all the inequities that are happening. And so, I mean, it's a beautiful thing in the theater, right? That like you're able to come in for all these roles that you might not have been seen for before, and people are like, oh wow, you know what I mean, this trans person and actor is fantastic and can play this role, and why did I never think of that before? Like, it's just such an interesting thing, I guess. And of course, like, I think we're like that's an exciting thing and a thrilling thing, but I wonder, you know, is this something that is going to continue like forever? Is this just one of those like it's the hot thing to do right now? You know,
I don't know how you feel, Pax, but I think it might also be that like as artists, especially when you're a young artist and when I first moved to the city, and even pre-pandemic, I was going out for a lot of things that like didn't necessarily fill me with great joy, but I was like, well, I'm an actor, and an actor does everything that they're asked to do all the time. And then during the pandemic, I did not turn into a pile of dust when I had nothing to do. And I was like, life's too short to do stuff that I don't give a fuck about. And so coming back into the theater, I've been auditioning for more. I've been submitting for more things that previously I don't think I would have been brave enough to submit for. And I have been putting myself into more spaces that previously I don't think I would have been brave enough to put myself into, because I would rather do nothing than do stuff that I don't give a fuck about. You know what I mean? I don't know. I feel braver for having survived 2 years of not doing anything. And I wonder that if it's just that now queer people are being more insistent that they're getting into more spaces, if that's maybe part of it. I don't know, Pax, if you have any feelings about that.
Yeah, I agree with all of that for sure. And I think like one of the things I love about Philly is that it's small enough that we can hold each other accountable, and that there's enough like enough people know each other, and the community is small enough that I think actually we're all moving in the direction of wanting like greater representation and visibility, and wanting our theaters to be more equitable. And that change can happen pretty sustainably and over time in a way that it can't happen in bigger cities with a larger theater community. In a smaller theater community, like we can actually see that change before our eyes, and like we know all the key players. So there's something really special about it being small, and that like I think like more people know that they need to cast a variety of people in a show. They know that a variety of people need to be behind the scenes. So I think, yeah, like any number of inequities in our theaters are being rooted out from the source, and and we're like on our way to a greater, more equitable theater community, while that's like always too slow. And it's always at the insistence of the people most affected to like make that change. And I wish that labor wasn't on all of those folks. So I agree that we're moving in that direction. And I think it's the effort of queer folks and BIPOC folks and everyone else doing that labor.
Yeah, and it's easy to say the thing that an ally could do is just to support monetarily, but what do you both think what can allies do, or people that just aren't even involved in theater or aren't necessarily queer, what can they do specifically in the Philly theater scene to show up and support that? Because you know, everybody doesn't like theater, everybody is not maybe interested in seeing this awesome basement show. I'll be there, but everyone may not be there. So in what ways can people show up and support?
I mean, I think physically showing up is great, and it's important. And I think bringing people is important. Bringing people who may not otherwise come see, you know, I don't know, Fun Home or something like that, or the Queer Basement Show. Like, talk your corporate friends into coming to see the Weird Basement Show, and they might actually find it really delightful, but they wouldn't have been exposed to it unless you brought them there. So if you're an ally, I feel like monetary, I'm never going to say no to monetary support. No. Yes, please and thank you. But also like bringing other people in so they can see how excellent the work that we're doing is important, you know, and not just saying like, oh, I like it so much, but like putting your money where your mouth is and showing up to actually support it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking about how like we need allies in positions of power as well, and how like um, I just did a show at the Guggenheim this past weekend that was very much like a queer story, very much started from, you know, a company that started in Philly 10 years ago and has done queer work that entire time. And like we want to see queer stories and trans stories on center stages. We want to see queer and trans stories on like every producer's list everywhere. So I think stop I want to stop settling for like the self-produced thing that like only a couple people see, but that I want us to be seen by so many people. And allyship in that way looks like producers and people putting stories on stages. But I also think, yeah, it can start with as simple as attending a show and realizing that like theater is live and we have the opportunity to be live with each other again. And that's something that like Netflix can't fill. So I think like supporting queer artists and supporting queer theater artists is something that can happen now, and that is ephemeral and beautiful in a way that we couldn't do during quarantine.
And to support what Pax just said, yeah, bringing as producers, bringing in queer artists into positions of power, and not just like the sort of one-off that you can put in your program that looks good when you're like, we did the diversity. Like actually putting queer people high up in places of administration, like in positions on your board, as people, not as like, well, we need some queer people to fill out our thing, but like recognizing that BIPOC voices and queer voices are important at high levels, not just like, look, we brought in a Black actor, so we did it. You know what I mean? Like we should be all up in it.
And I think it's, you know, it's like that all those people are out there. You know, I think for the longest time it's like, well, we can't find them. Where, you know, where are they? They're nowhere to be found. And it's like, no, we're here. You just like, we're not looking, you know, and like that.
No shortage. Yeah.
Right. It's like there is no shortage of like, you know, like BIPOC producers and directors and you know, like associate artistic directors and managing directors and company managers and stage managers and like, you know, all those people that are making the decisions, you know, on a higher up level, they're all out there. Yeah, and so I think that's I'm agreeing with both of you. I'm yes-anding.
Well, I think there's an assumption sometimes that like if you are a member of a minority, you can only tell stories that are specific to that minority, and so you don't hire Black directors if it's not a Black show. You don't hire queer directors if it's not a queer show, which is really limiting, because we make great art that isn't queer too.
And maybe we have something really interesting to say about this cis production where gender is present, you know, like maybe we have something really interesting to say about a production that isn't specifically about queer or trans experience. I don't know. I think that's like really fascinating that like, yeah, that's the weird thing about oppression, right? Is that like when a minority isn't the center of a show, we think that race or gender don't exist in that show. Of course they do. Like it's always present, and there's always a message being sent, whether or not it's about an experience of a marginalized community.
Yeah. And this isn't even a question; it's more a comment about, you know, bringing people to the theaters to see the things, because really when they're watching, they're just taking it in. The real work happens when they leave and they're talking about it and they're thinking about this thing that they saw. So it is really important to have these specific stories of different marginalized backgrounds being told, so that allies and people who, even if they are in this specific demographic, they don't have this specific story and these nuances. So just seeing it and being able to absorb it and then take it back to their corporate luncheon with all their coworkers to discuss this cool thing that they've learned, this new language they can like be a light. It's just, you know, everybody who sees the show could then take what they learned and then just pass it on, and it spreads, like you said earlier, like wildfire.
Yeah.
That's part of why I love theater, is that like we can share and say things that we could never say in a conversation. And I feel the same way about music, that like there's so much osmosis that happens that can't be like, we can't just say unartfully in a conversation. Yeah.
It's easy to remember that chorus and just recite that at the office versus like anything else. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I want to jump in here, and maybe we've kind of touched this a little, but I'm interested to hear a little bit more. I think so. The question is, kind of what like steps have you taken or are you taking like in your work to kind of push like the narrative that you want to move forward? And I think Max, you're kind of doing that in a way with it's gender funk, correct? Gender funk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's right.
And you, Eli, and like you were just saying, like the work that you're choosing to do at this point, like now that you've come out of the pandemic, like you're really focused on doing the work that you want to do and going in for. How do you feel like you both are kind of mixing in and melding like what you want to be doing, or like the stories you want to be? No, it's not. What's the way that I'm looking for? But like, how are you? Like what are you doing within the work, I guess, to kind of push the narrative forward that you want to tell?
I think in a big way, just being openly queer in spaces has a lot of power. And sometimes I forget that because I am blessed to live in such a little queer bubble that I forget that my very existence is resistance. You know what I mean? Like I'm already making a statement just by being visible in a lot of spaces. And I think especially when I work with college students, it is extremely important to be just visible, to be like, look, I am a trans queer person and I am doing like the work that I love to do. And I am like, not in a, to say it gets better feels like sort of cheesy, but in this way that it's like, when I was your age, I didn't know any of these things and I felt very trapped. And I tried to make myself something I was not because that's what I thought art required me to be. I wore those solid colored dresses and friggin' nude pumps to cattle calls because I thought that's what was required of me.
The jewel tone dresses. Shout out
No, my girl costume. And I don't wear those anymore. But just to share with queer youth, like don't like be you. That's what's valuable, is your you-ness, whatever that is, and knowing that it might change over time and that is also excellent and valid and valuable about you. And I think getting into the college level is really great because those are going to be the people that like the groundwater that rises up, and when all of these freaking old white dudes who are monopolizing the arts pass away, the groundwater will fill up to replace that spot. And I think too, like, just college students are so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, you know what I mean? And like the world is full of promise, but also full of anxiety. And I feel like that's just such a great time to get in there and be like, yes, yes, be you. Now is the time. Like, feel empowered to do stuff and come into the world with that fire. So I think those are my two main things: just like being myself, advocating for myself in spaces, and then telling people who are younger in their career to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I vibe with that a lot. And I think about like the power that comes from existence as resistance. Something that I'm thinking of is like when we are our authentic selves, it allows us to find other people, and the kind of collective power that comes from building community with queer and trans folks in Philly. I think that's where I'm focusing my energy, is like, how do we organize and how do we find collective power as a group of people who like the city and like the theater scene would like to pit against each other. There's lots of ways that like we're trying to be divided, but that, and in finding our shared strength, that's a way that we can advocate as a collective. That feels really powerful to me. And beyond that, I think like I just want to make excellent work. And I think by making excellent work that comes from queer and trans people, like we are paving the way for our stories to be told and to be told on like premier stages.
Mm-hmm. So I want to circle back a little. We were talking earlier about, I mean, I was really jealous, honestly, about how you guys were saying there's so many kind of like small startup theaters in Philly that are doing the work already. Do you want to just shout some of those out? So if people who are watching like don't know where they are or the names of these theaters, kind of let's shout them out so people know where to look and where they can see see some of these performances and stories and things.
Well, the Bearded Ladies is pretty dope. That's the first one that comes to mind. And
Yeah.
they're some of the first, when I first came to the city, that was some of the first stuff I saw was Bearded Lady stuff because someone was like, "This is weird, you'll like this." And they were right. It was, and I did. Highly recommend Bearded Ladies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same way. The Bearded Ladies Cabaret is one of my artistic homes and where I do the work that I feel most represents who I am and where I can authentically be a queer and trans artist in the room. And that my experience is both valued, but also like a part of the content of the show and part of like what makes it excellent. And then I'm so grateful for the Strides Collective and other folks doing like queer theater and not compromising their mission based on like the folks who are running the room. I think that's so amazing. Yeah, really grateful for those companies.
I would say too that some of the small places that really focus on newer works, like Azuka Theater and Interact Theater, have been places that I have really enjoyed working and have done a lot of queer work. That like I just did Intimacy for a show at Azuka that was written by Val Dunn, who's a great writer, a local queer writer. Yeah, shows that where they're doing more shows where like the queerness isn't a gimmick. And I think that that's important.
Yeah.
I think what's been interesting in some of the like queer shows that I've seen or read recently is I'm loving this just like and kind of as we've said today before, just like queer people being queer people. You know, there's no trauma, there's no
Right.
I don't know. It's just queer people like living life, and those are some of the most, that's very real. I mean, of course, like a lot of the queer experience is kind of wrapped in a bit of trauma. It couldn't not be, but we also live like very beautiful, fulfilling, rich lives, and like it's great to see that every once in a while.
And
So
sometimes my trauma isn't related to my queerness. Sometimes I have some shared collective human trauma that other non-queer humans can be like, oh, I too
right.
experience whatever that thing is that's not related to your queerness, but also I'm queer.
Right.
Like,
Right.
Totally. I think the problem we so often run into with like cis and heterosexual folks telling our stories is that like it is focused on trauma because that's the only experience that they understand of our lives, and it's not focused on joy because they really don't understand that. And when they do talk about our trauma, they get it wrong. So I feel like, yeah, like part of what it means to like simply tell our stories and to like make work that may or may not have to do with queer trans experiences, that we touch on the joy and the like the euphoria that comes from like simply being able to live our lives, that is so not understood by some folks.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about this small community of queer theater makers, but what is it like in the grand Philly theater scene as a whole, aside from just this army that we're building and this like community, the theater as a whole, how welcoming has that been? What is the experience like there? Or do you guys like are you all purposefully like involve yourself only with people that
listen, if those big theaters want to hire me, I will work for them. And I've worked for some of the larger theaters and had a good time. I've done a bunch of stuff at People's Light where I was a children's show where I was a chipmunk who was essentially genderless, and which is great. Yeah, I think the big companies move slower because I think they're more is this true? This is how I feel. So I don't know if this is true, entirely true or not, but this feels like what it is they are more beholden to their cis het white subscriber base.
Or think they are.
So they have a fear of doing things that will drive away all of those old cis het white people, and so they don't want to take risks. Yeah. And when you're a smaller company, you're teetering on the edge of everything at any time. So you're like, fuck it, I may as well do what brings me joy and not worry too hard about my subscriber base. And so while that gives the big companies a lot of money that they can throw at stuff, which is super fun sometimes, it means that they can be really limited with the choices and the freedom to actually do stuff that is interesting or challenging in any way.
And that makes me really respect the companies. I'm thinking of Theater Horizon specifically, who like so actively are looking to educate and to like move their subscriber base forward. Clearly, their context is in Norristown, where there's a huge Hispanic community, a huge Black community, a huge white community, some Asian community. But like have decided like we're not just gonna do what other stages are doing, and their most popular shows have been shows like Black Nativity and The Color Purple.
Well,
Like
The Color Purple is so good.
and like that's just living proof of like you like this a show will sell out if it's like excellent and great, you know? And it and like it doesn't matter who the audience is. Like people will come when the theater is great. And like yeah, I think we need to stop like theaters need to stop using the excuse that they're like playing to their base because they only think they're beholden to them in that way, when actually what they need to do is excellent work, and that work is often coming from marginalized communities.
And I think they're really underestimating their bases, frankly.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
For sure. And I think also to circle back one more time, I mean, this is the whole reason you guys were just talking about, you know, bringing allies and the community, bringing their friends and their coworkers and the people to the theater, because once that cis white old kind of like donor base dies off or goes away, then you can fill all those seats with this more forward-thinking population, which that's I think going to help maybe these larger stages.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they can probably be doing more now, but if they like actually need like people who are like, hey, yeah, no, this is what we want to see, and I'm going to give you, $1,000, like then they have that.
Yeah, I think that will definitely happen, and I think like what I want to do in the meantime is like find the folks who like are older and who are white cis het folks who like really want to support our work, who really want to support queer artists, who want to support the like weird stuff that we're doing, and who can fall in love with it just as much as anyone else. And like in the Bearded Ladies Cabaret, there's like so many amazing donors of that demographic. Like I think they can be inspired by the work, and the specific is universal. Like queer trans stories, in their specificity and their weirdness, in their joy, can be universal to a whole audience. So yeah, I don't want to discount anyone, but I also, like you're saying, Cameron, like I want so many more people in our theaters, and it to be accessible to so many more people who are bringing their friends who have never been to theater, who haven't had access to it in the past, outside of that white cis het crowd as well.
Speaking of these queer, weird, trans stories, what are you two working on? Shout your things out. Is there anything fun you're working on, or anything you want to plug right now? Let the people know.
Yeah.
I just finished just closed yesterday, R&J with New Light Theater, Shakespeare's R&J, which I had not read before they approached me to direct it. It's a queer, it's a retelling of Romeo and Juliet, and it's like 4 boys in a Catholic military school, and they find a copy of Romeo and Juliet and start reading it and then start living it, and then like 2 of them start to have feelings for each other, and the other 2. Anyway, it was very gay and very movementy. And I think it went over really well. A lot of people were really touched, so that was great. But at this moment, I'm in Cleveland. I'm in at the Cleveland Playhouse. I'm about to be Aramis in The Three Musketeers, which is a traditionally male role, but it me. And then after this, I don't think I can officially announce this because they told me I couldn't, but I have signed it. I will be going to a very prominent Shakespearean theater in the United States, where I will be playing Orsino, Duke Orsino, which is also a traditionally male role, and Toby, and then also playing a trans role in an adaptation of something that is sort of inspired by Shakespeare. So I have a lot of queer things happening right now, which is really, really great.
Go off.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so then also, where can people like find, like plug your socials? Where can people
Yeah.
find you? So if they want to see these shows and they're in like the neighborhood.
Yeah, if you're in Cleveland, my Instagram. I have one friend in Cleveland, so I know at least one person lives here. My Instagram is Ever in Motley, which is a reference to Fools as my favorite Shakespearean characters wearing motley, Ever in Motley. And then you can find me Eli Lynn on Facebook, but I'm not super active in terms of posting on Facebook. I also have an actor website, which I remember to update like every 5 months. That's eli-lynn.com. So you can check there, but Instagram's probably the best way.
Yes, no, we'll totally put both your Instagrams and socials on our website, on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
theater page, so everyone will be able to see that as well. I'll make a mental note. Hopefully, by the time everyone sees this, I did my job. And Pax, what about you? And you've got, I mean, you're a musician, so you probably also have music out. I mean, like, are there things on Spotify we can find? Like,
Oh,
what?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for asking. Eli, I'm coming to Cleveland. I would love to.
Listen, apparently the train from Philadelphia is very easy. Amtrak comes straight here, so.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. I would love to come.
Connect.
Thanks for asking about music, Cameron. I just released last year during quarantine an album of 10 non-binary love songs called Change. The album is called Change, and it's on all streaming platforms. Unfortunately, Amazon as well. You can find it there or on Bandcamp. I just worked on a show, like I said, at the Guggenheim called Rose, You Are Who You Eat, which is from a lot of Bearded Ladies Cabaret folks. And it's about like a queer trans experience. My partner, John, is like genderqueer. And I'm going to start that section over. Is like genderqueer. My partner John wrote this show, and it's about eating her twin in the womb, and that being an explanation from her aunt about why she is the way she is, which is super, super interesting and fascinating. And I wrote music. It's a like all devised original show with original music that we presented at the Guggenheim yesterday, and we will be presenting in DC next weekend, and hopefully bringing back to Philly soon. But other than that, next up I'm working on This Is the Week That Is at 1812 Productions, which I can't tell you anything yet because we haven't written it yet. We'll write it in 3 weeks starting tomorrow, and then it'll go up. It's the 16th year of this show, and last year I got to play Adele, so that's pretty great.
Yes.
Yeah.
And did you have an Instagram, Pax?
I do, yeah. My Instagram is Pax Ressler. And everyone should check out Gender Funk Philly on Instagram as well. And my website is paxwrestler.com.
We'll be following both of you, so expect that notification. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to keep this 30 minutes for us, but also for everyone viewing. I feel like everyone has short attention spans now, like they can't sit for a long time. So I want to thank you both so much for being here and just like sharing a little bit more about yourself and your experience in the arts and in Philly. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Of course. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. And I will do a quick plug for the Strides Collective production of The Pigeon happening this October. If only I could remember. Is it Christchurch? You two are gonna know. It's at Christchurch. That's the venue? It's called Christchurch.
Yeah, definitely.
Neighborhood House?
Christchurch Neighborhood House.
Neighborhood House. That's where we will be. You can check all of our stuff out at The Strides Collective on Instagram, or thestridescollective.com is our website. I want to thank you all so much for being here. Keep watching because we have a little teaser trailer of The Pigeon after this. But that's all. We're signing off.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Scene 7. A few months ago, Declan is at the bar to his new apartment, jostling his keys to find the right one. A box hoisted up on his hip. He is struggling not to lose balance. Cora enters wearing a robe and fuzzy slippers.
Need some help?
Oh, no, that's okay.
Let me help you. I insist. I'm the welcome committee.
Oh. I like your slippers.
Thanks. They're Louis Vuitton.
Declan doesn't laugh.
Just kidding.
Declan doesn't say anything.
The keys?
Oh, right.
Declan drops the keys into Cora's hand. She instantly picks the right one and inserts it into the lock. She turns it and pushes it open.
Thanks.
Declan walks in. Cora follows behind him.
Oh, you didn't need to. I'm
Declan, right?
Declan realizes he's not going to escape her.
Yep. That's me.
Cora, we spoke on the phone about the room?
Oh, yeah, of course. Thanks for the help, Cora.
So, what brings you to Denver?
Oh, I got a new job out here, so I start Monday.
Congratulations!
Thanks. Yeah, I'm excited.
You look tired.
I am. Drove out here by myself, so
From?
Vegas.
Cora nods and looks around.
Well, rent is due the 4th of every month. Don't be late on it.
Right.
This unit is nice. Probably my favorite in the whole building. It'll get a little stuffy in the kitchen if you're cooking, so I recommend cracking the window.
Thanks.
Plus, you'll get to see the pigeon.
The pigeon?
Yes.
Like the bird?
Mm-hmm. A pigeon likes to hang out on the fire escape between our 2 units. It's very friendly.
Oh. I don't really like birds.
Interesting. Neither did the last tenant who lived here.
What happened to him?
Declan is attempting to make a joke, but Cora is staring forward expressionless.
Enjoy your night, Mr. Barkin.
Cora exits the apartment down the hall and walks out the front door. She leans against the side of the building and pulls out a lighter and cigarette. She lights it up and takes a drag. A few moments later, Phoebe walks by. She spots Cora and takes her headphones off.
Hey, can I borrow a light?
Sure.
Cora lights up Phoebe's cigarette.
Thanks.
Phoebe exits as Cora watches her. Scene 8. Adam alone at Red Bar. He is standing at a high-top table, freshly shaven and in business casual. He nervously runs his right hand through his hair while holding a bottle of Heineken in the other. After a few moments, Nate enters and looks around. He already has a bottle of cider from the bar. Finally, he spots Adam and walks over to him.
Adam?
Nate, hey, good to meet you.
Adam goes for a hug. Nate goes for the bro handshake thing. It's awkward, but only for a moment.
Cheers.
They clink bottles.
Sorry we had to meet under these circumstances.
Yeah, me too. I'm really sorry about Declan. I bet you and your parents are worried sick.
Huh?
What?
He doesn't. Sorry, I guess I just assumed that you knew that he. He doesn't talk to our parents. I mean, not often, anyway. It's not unusual for them not to hear from him for 2 weeks or 2 months, even.
Oh,
I figured that would have come up between you two.
Adam takes a sip of his beer, looking at Nate.
we only went on 2 dates, so I didn't really know him.
Declan has a hard time connecting with new people.
I see.
And him and I haven't, we haven't talked much recently. But he mentioned he started seeing someone and he said you two hit it off right away.
Yeah, I guess that's true. We did. Can I ask if it's not too invasive?
I'm an open book.
Okay. Do your parents know he's
Gay?
Yeah.
Dude, why do you think they don't talk to him?
Right.
Sorry, that came out of my mouth really weird. I wasn't trying to.
Oh, it's fine. I just didn't want to assume.
Totally. Yeah. But you could have assumed. I mean, because you would have been right. He came out to them when he was 20. He wanted to bring his boyfriend, Tyler, home for Thanksgiving break, and they ended up going to Tyler's house instead. Declan never came home after that. He graduated and stayed in New York. I'm surprised he didn't tell you any of that.
So your relationship with him during all that time wasn't super tight?
Not really. Between New York and Denver, he stayed with me for a week,
We kind of fought a lot, though, just weren't seeing eye to eye, I guess. Still, it was nice to get to spend some time with him, but yeah, in general, he wasn't always the easiest person to track down. There was this time in college, he turned off his phone for like a month. No one had heard from him. Ended up being at a cabin in the woods, and anyway, this feels different.
Right. Yeah. Again, I'm sorry I can't be of more help.
Actually, I think you can be. That's why I wanted to talk in person.
Oh,
Adam reaches inside the inside pocket of his jacket and pulls out a white envelope.
I had the superintendent of his apartment building unlock his door for me. I was concerned he might have been, well, anyway, he wasn't in there, but we found this letter. It has your name on it.
I've been broken, taken apart, and